The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, Words to Know. China, a fine white ceramic material. These dishes are made of china. Torso, the trunk of the body. The arms and legs are hooked to the torso. Ennui, restlessness from being bored. Wardrobe, a person's entire collection of clothes. Pocket watch, a watch on a chain that is kept in a pocket. Condescending, talking to someone like you are better than they are. Maid, someone you pay to clean your house. Well, hello friends. It's nice to see you again. We are going to be starting a brand new book today. This book is called The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And I have to share with you, the first time I read this book, I couldn't believe how many different things it made me feel. That's how I knew it was a good book. I also was really sad when it was over because I loved the book so much that I wanted it to keep going. So I think you might enjoy this story as well, which is why I decided to share it with you. Here we go. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Once in a house on Egypt Street, there lived a rabbit who was made almost entirely of china. He had china arms and china legs, china paws and a china head, a china torso and a china nose. His arms and legs were jointed and joined by wire so that his china elbows and china knees could bend, giving him much freedom of movement. His ears were made out of real rabbit fur, and beneath the fur there were strong bendable wires which allowed the ears to be arranged into poses that reflected the rabbit's mood. He could be excited or tired or full of ennui. His tail, too, was made of real rabbit fur and was fluffy and soft and well-shaped. The rabbit's name was Edward Tulane, and he was tall. He measured about 3 feet from the tip of his ears to the tip of his feet. His eyes were painted and intelligent blue. In all, Edward Tulane felt himself to be an exceptional rabbit. Only his whiskers made him sad. They were very long and beautiful, as they should be, but he didn't know where they came from. Edward felt quite strongly that they were not the whiskers of a rabbit. Who the whiskers belonged to, he didn't know. Oh, what sort of a terrible animal did they used to be on? That was the question that Edward could not bear to think about for too long, and so he did not, because he, as a rule, did not like to think of anything unpleasant. Edward's owner was a 10-year-old dark-haired girl named Abilene Tulane, who thought almost as highly of Edward as Edward thought of himself. Each morning after she dressed herself for school, Abilene would dress Edward. The china rabbit had an extraordinary wardrobe. He had handmade silk suits, custom shoes made from the finest leather and designed specifically for his little rabbit feet. And he had hats, so many hats. Each hat had little holes in it so that his ears could easily fit. Each pair of well-cut pants had a small pocket for Edward's gold pocket watch. Abilene would wind his watch for him every morning. "Now, Edward," she said to him after she was done winding his watch, "when the big hand is on the 12 and the little hand is on the 3, I will come home to you." She placed Edward on a chair in the dining room and positioned the chair so that Edward was looking out the window and he could see the path that led up to the Tulane front door. Abilene balanced the watch on his left leg. She would kiss the tip of his ears and then she left. And Edward would spend the day sitting and staring out at Egypt Street, listening to the tick of his watch and waiting. Of all the seasons of the year, the rabbit most preferred the winter. For in the winter, the sun set early and the dining room windows became dark and Edward could see his own reflection in the glass. And what a reflection it was! What an elegant figure he was! Edward never got tired of staring at himself and his amazing reflection. In the evening, Edward would sit at the dining room table with the other members of the Tulane family. There was Abilene, her mother and father, and Abilene's grandmother, who was called Pellegrina. True, Edward's ears barely cleared the tabletop, and true also, he spent the whole meal staring straight ahead at nothing but the bright, blinding white of the tablecloth. But he was there. He was a rabbit at the table. Abilene's parents found it charming that she considered Edward to be real, and that she sometimes requested that a phrase or a story be repeated because Edward had not heard it. "Papa," Abilene would say, "I'm afraid that Edward didn't catch that last bit of what you said." Abilene's father would then turn in the direction of Edward's ears and speak slowly, repeating what he had just said for the benefit of the China rabbit. Edward pretended out of courtesy to Abilene to listen, but in truth he was not very interested in what people had to say. And also, he did not care for Abilene's parents and their condescending manner towards him. All adults, as a matter of fact, condescended to him. Only Abilene's grandmother spoke to him like Abilene did, as one equal to another. Pellegrina was very old. She had a large, sharp nose and bright black eyes that shone like dark stars. It was Pellegrina who was responsible for Edward's existence. It was she who had had him made. She had ordered his silk suits and his pocket watch and his wonderful hats and his bendable ears and his fine leather shoes and his jointed arms and legs. She had ordered them all from a master craftsman in her native France. It was Pellegrina who had given him as a gift to Abilene on her 7th birthday. And it was Pellegrina who came each night to tuck Abilene into her bed and Edward into his. "Will you tell us a story, Pellegrina?" Abilene asked her grandmother every single night. "Oh, not tonight, lady," said Pellegrina. "But when?" asked Abilene. "What night?" "Soon," said Pellegrina. "Soon there will be a story." And then she turned off the light, and Edward and Abilene lay in the dark of the bedroom. "I love you, Edward," Abilene said each night after Pellegrina had left. She said those words, and then she waited, almost like she thought Edward would say something back. Edward said nothing. He said nothing because, of course, he could not speak. He lay in a small bed next to Abilene's large one, and he stared up at the ceiling, and he listened to the sound of her breath entering and leaving her body, knowing that soon she'd be asleep. But Edward's eyes were painted on, and he could not close them, so he was always awake. Sometimes if Abilene put him into his bed on his side instead of on his back, he could see through the cracks in the curtains, and he could see out into the dark, dark night. On clear nights, the stars shone bright, and their pinprick light comforted Edward in a way that he could not understand. Often he stared at the stars all night long, until the dark finally gave way to dawn. Chapter 2. And in this manner Edward's days passed, one into the other. Nothing remarkable happened. Oh, there was the occasional small drama. Once, while Abilene was at school, the neighbor's dog, a male brindled boxer named Rosie, came into the house uninvited and unannounced and lifted his leg on the dining room table, spraying the white tablecloth with pee. He then trotted over and sniffed Edward, and before Edward even had time to think about what was happening, he was in Rosie's mouth, and Rosie was shaking him back and forth vigorously, growling and drooling. Fortunately, Abilene's mother walked past the dining room and saw what was happening to Edward. "Drop it!" she shouted at Rosie. And then Rosie was surprised and did as she was told. Edward's silk suit was stained with drool, and his head hurt for several days afterwards, but it was his ego that had suffered the most damage. Abilene's mother had referred to him as "it," and she was more angered that the dog had peed on her tablecloth than she was about what had happened to Edward. And then there was the time that a maid, who was new in the Tulane household and eager to impress her employees by how hard she worked, came upon Edward sitting in a chair in the dining room. What's this bunny doing here?" she said out loud. Edward did not care at all for the word bunny. He thought he was much better than a bunny. The maid bent over him and looked into his eyes. She said. And then she stood back up and she put her hands on her hips. "I reckon you're just like every other thing in this house. Something needs to be cleaned and dusted." And so the maid vacuumed Edward Tulane. She sucked each of his long ears up into the vacuum cleaner hose. She pawed at his clothes and beat on his tail. She dusted his face. And in her zeal to clean him, she vacuumed Edward's gold pocket watch right off of his lap. The watch went zoop into the vacuum cleaner with a distressing clank that the maid did not even pay attention to. When she was done, she put the dining room chair back at the table. And uncertain about exactly where Edward should go, she finally decided to shove him up among the dolls on a shelf in Abeline's room. "That's right," said the maid. "There you go." Then she left Edward on the shelf in a most terrible position. His nose was actually touching his knees. And then he just had to wait there with the dolls twittering and giggling at him like a flock of angry birds until Abeline came home from school and found him missing. And she ran from room to room calling out his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Edward!" There was no way, of course, for him to let her know where he was. There was no way for him to answer her. He just had to sit and wait. When Abeline found him, she held him close, so close that Edward could feel her heart beating, leaping almost out of her chest. She had been so upset. "Edward," she said. "Oh, Edward, I love you. I never want you to be away from me." The rabbit, too, was experiencing a great deal of emotion, but he did not feel love. He felt annoyed that he had been so terribly treated, that he had been handled by the maid like a serving bowl or a teapot. The only satisfaction he had from that whole affair was that the new maid was fired immediately. Edward's pocket watch was soon found, deep within the bowels of the vacuum cleaner. It was dented, but still in working condition. It was then returned to him by Abeline's father, who presented it with a mocking bow. "Sir Edward," he said, "your timepiece, I believe?" The Rosie affair and the vacuum cleaner incident. Those were the great dramas of Edward's life, until the night of Abeline's 11th birthday, when at the dinner table, as the cake was being served, a ship was mentioned. And that's the end of chapter 2. So, we've met some characters in the story. Right now we've met Edward and Abeline and the grandma and the mom and dad. We also met some secondary characters like the dog Rosie. But my question for you today is this. Do you have something that is as special to you as Edward is to Abeline? When I was little growing up, I had a toy. I wish I still had it. It was actually an Ewok from the movie Star Wars, but I loved that little Ewok. His name was Wicket, and I took him with me everywhere. To church, to the grocery store, to my grandma's house, everywhere. That Wicket and I were together. I slept with him. I was really sad one day when I finally got grown up and decided that I should give him away. I should have saved him. Do you have a toy or something else that's just as special to you as Edward is to Abeline? Something that you would be really upset if you didn't have anymore? Something that gives you comfort and makes you feel happy? If you do, please share it with me. You can post a picture on Seesaw or just tell me about it. I'd love to know. Thank you for listening. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.